Freeze-dried water. The point of doing freeze-dried water is not because you'll end up with freeze-dried water that's ridiculous. The point is, I want to show what happens to the water. The fact that it's sublimated, it just simply disappears. It never gets anything wet. I'm going to put it on a piece of craft paper, and I'll show that here. So get a little drop of water, and you can see it very quickly shows up a dark spot. The least little bit of moisture, it turns dark brown. You'll see it in an instant. But at least we could make it kind of fun and interesting instead of just an ice cube sitting there. So here's what I've got. I'm going to start with some distilled water, and I'm going to be transferring this into the freezer to make the little cubes. So I'm going to get them half, 2/3 full. Tap water, and then tap water with a teeny bit of food color so we can see it better. Okay, I'll just add 1 drop. Okay, just going to have 1 drop of food coloring. So that will be this 3rd set of cells. And this is some gelatin, just plain gelatin that's made for just clear jello projects. So I put very little in there. I have no idea if it's going to be thick enough to work. Okay, and I think last, Cascade Ice Lemonade. Okay, so now I'm going to put this in the freezer to pre-freeze, and then it can go in the freeze dryer. So it's a little bit more of that gelatin. So what I'm going to do is cut off another little chunk of it, just so I can have another comparison of basically water. That just cracks me up. So I'm going to pre-freeze a piece of this. Whoa. So just a couple of chunks of this. Again, this is just a small amount of plain gelatin in water. Just another one of the freeze tests. Oh, that cracks me up. I have one of the freeze dryer trays lined with a piece of craft paper. The importance of that is the instant you get it wet, it shows a dark spot. So for the freeze dried water, the importance is that it never gets wet. So this is going into the freeze dryer to pre-chill, so that everything will be cold before I put these samples on there. And this is the gelatin sample that has very little gelatin, so it's mostly water. So that'll be interesting to see how much it holds the structure. And this is a very heavy piece, so I don't know what I'm going to do with that. I don't know if that'll fit, but I think it will. But anyway, that has more gelatin. And then these have even more gelatin, because I kept diluting it to see how thin I could make it and still have it hold its shape. So these will be interesting. And then I'm going to leave these in the freezer and ready to go. This is in the freezer so everything stays cold. And I'll pop these out, but leave them set in here so that they're ready to pop onto the tray. With the minimal of touching and the highest speed possible to make sure that they stay frozen. Okay, then this is the water with the single drop of food coloring. Okay, and then the tap water, I think. Then again, I'll get these back in the freezer until Everything else is cold and ready to go. Then the distilled water. Okay, and then the Jello pieces. So those will go back in the freezer. It's time to put the water in the freeze dryer. And that's the distilled water. And then the tap water, the food coloring water, the gelatin, and the lemonade parts, the very thinned out gelatin, and the slightly thinned out gelatin. You need to be able to see it, and I need to be able to see the paper around it. So I'm going to move some of the water ones out further. Okay, so, and that's more of the distilled water. So then I could move in a couple of those. And then the gelatin ones will move back. And then the very lightly gelatin ones. Okay, I think that should show. That's it for now, and we'll watch it. a look at it. All right, so this is the way it was in there. So this was the distilled water, the tap water with the 1 drop of food coloring, and then the gelatin ones. And then also the sparkling sugar-free lemonade. Now, unfortunately, I opened it to check some drying of another thing. Well, it wasn't on video, and these pieces kind of flew around because they basically weigh nothing. It's the strangest stuff. So the food coloring, there's what's left of the food coloring. Yeah, and then the lemonade. I think I'll try that. Yeehaw! Oh, that's pretty good. Very sweet and lemony. The distilled water had very, very little of any residue. I'm kind of surprised it had any. But what it has is so little. You have a teeny bit of powder, and the tap water had more, but still very little. So this was the most rigid gelatin, and then I added more water to it and had this piece, and then added even more water to it and had this one. So starting with one of these, oh, that's interesting. This is the most interesting one. I wonder why this one's different. I wonder, third one back, I could probably trace it back, but this I can actually see some clear lines through it. Interesting. Let's see if I can zoom in on that more. Okay. So what is that? Interesting. So I'm going to try. Wow, those are quite solid. And again, the other bits kind of blew around when you opened it. So all right, so that's really interesting. So that's the gelatin one. And this had about honestly, I didn't measure it because I didn't expect it to do this well, but it had about a tablespoon of gelatin powder in about a cup of water. Okay, so anyway, and then when I saw how fast and hard that set, I added more water to what was left and made this one. I hope you're staying focused on this. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this one. And this one kind of puffed out as it froze before it was freeze-dried. And I wouldn't be terribly surprised if we found a wet spot in these because this is so thick. Yeah, it seems to be. Yeah, there's a wet spot in the middle of this one. Yeah, see if I touch that paper. Yep. So yeah, this thick piece still had a little bit of water in it, but it's very interesting. It's a lot more solid than I would have expected. Okay, now this one was the least amount of gelatin because there were the most amount of water because I kept adding water to it. So this one is when I added another batch of water to the original set. So this one's more flexible. Yeah, that's quite firm. These are quite hard. This one's actually like really lightweight styrofoam. you can make gelatin packaging out of this. Of course, if you get it wet, it's going to melt, so that wouldn't be good if there's any kind of moisture. All right, now, yeah, this is kind of neat because it looks like a very clear spot right there and right there, that line. I don't know how close it'll let me get. Oh, that's pretty neat. Yeah, so I want to try to cut it on one of those lines. Okay, it's like a hollow spot, I think, in the structure. Yeah, so this line, it's like where it doesn't have any, but it has a top layer, but it's not, doesn't have gelatin on the inside. Oh yeah, there, you can see it from this side. A very thin layer along the bottom and then a groove in it. Oh, that's neat. So the point is, as it's freeze drying, it never gets wet. It's frozen before it starts. It sublimates directly to a gas and then solidifies, I guess would be the right way to say it, on the on the barrel of the chamber, on the inside layer of the chamber. So it's not wet at any time. So it doesn't really melt. It just goes from the solid straight to the gas, and it leaves everything else behind. The actual solid materials, the non-water material, just stays there. Okay, and that's all I have to say about that, except for this is neat.